Hey, welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great businesses. I'm Brad Giles, and as always, I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Brad, I'm doing great. Excited to do another show. It's a wonderful creative process that we get to do here together, and sharing some of our insights and what we get to learn from all the awesome companies that we work with. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to the show today.
Good. Yeah, I enjoy our chats to prepare as well. And we get into some interesting subjects. So on that topic, what might we have in store today?
Well, today we're talking about this thing called job love and what is it that's required to endure in your business? And a huge piece of it is actually liking how you spend your time. And
Mm,
although it sounds um, actually really basic, it's shocking how many people don't enjoy the way they spend their time. And it's even more shocking when they own the company and they
yeah.
end up doing a bunch of stuff that they don't enjoy. So we're talking about finding a way to endure in your business by really enjoying your job essentially, and how you spend your time today.
Because you can build that any way that you want. Awesome. Well, let's get into it.
Yes.
Let's get
Yeah,
into
and I
it.
think that's a great point, Brad, is you can build it any way you want, but as people are building companies and get lost in it, they forget.
Yeah.
They forget about the choices they have, and they're just so buried in what they're doing and so busy trying to do the right thing and take care of their customers and deal with their employees and manage cash or whatever else they have to do, especially when they're smaller. People get lost. And people have this mistaken belief that they need to do certain things. And
What
that's,
type of certain things?
oh, there's big lists.
First one that comes to mind.
First one that comes to mind, something to do with banking, something to do with
Yeah.
touching the cash.
Yeah.
Some people don't like to have additional signatories on accounts or things like that. So controlling cash would be one. Um, Sometimes, dealing with important customers if it's a smaller business. All kinds of things. Like, it's interesting. And one of the things we'll talk about today is that, one of the CEOs I work with, Mark is his name, awesome guy. He's built a very excellent business. And he's really keeps talking about this thing called billionaire habits.
Mm.
And really it's a way for him, and he's well on his way to building $1 billion business, well on his way. One of the things he does, it helps him to tune into the thinking and the frequency of incredibly successful people. And when you're incredibly successful at that level, you think about things very differently than, the plumber with, 3 or 4 or 5 guys or crews and a couple of vans running around town.
Yeah.
And it's a different way of seeing things. So, he uses the concept of billionaire habits to tune into that frequency and look from there back down at a situation and help make better ideas. And from a billionaire habit point of view, um, everything can be delegated. Actually, everything, even things you wouldn't think you could delegate if at that level of success. So if you could do it at that level of success, why not do it where you are now if it's going to make you happier, make
More.
your business perform better?
Yeah. I remember. So I've started 6 companies over my career, um, and I remember once a month there was this particular time every month when I would start to get a bit grumpy. I'd get a bit grumpy. I'd be a bit short with people, and I'd be a little bit. I'd be snapping at people, or I'd be not in a really good place. And funnily enough, that seemed to correlate with the time when I had to do the reconciliation of the accounts. And I can think of,
You did the reconciliation of the accounts?
well, you've got to factor in the size of the business. It
Yeah.
was only me at that point. Yeah.
You're reconciling. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like day one of a business, if it's only you, you're doing everything, right?
Yep.
And yeah, so it was not fun. I would do anything, and I got out of it, and we employed people and everything else happened. But yeah, I could think of many things I'd rather do than reconcile accounts.
Of course. It's interesting, Brad, is that, I don't know how many different businesses I've had. Like, if you start the stuff I did when I was a kid, like, selling painted rocks and tadpoles, I've probably had half a dozen to a dozen different things. And a lot of them were smaller things I played with as a kid and I was younger. And as you're saying that, I remembered I had to put myself through college. I started a business because I had to pay for it. And it was called Student Yard Care, where we would go, take care of people's yards, hauling away garbage in people's yards, cutting grass, pressure washing, just anything that needed labor, we would do it. And I remember very quickly, it got to the point where I actually had a crew working while I was going to school, which was a long funny there. As I was actually, I was late to a very critical meeting where I was getting the most important scholarship of the year for my program. And I won it, which I didn't know. And I was late. And the dean of the School of Business is at the auditorium down at the bottom. And I'm walking in the back late, trying to slide into class. And they go, here he is. And I remember, but me and my guys wrote getting a job started that morning, because I would do the quoting and let the guys go and do the work. And they were doing the job all day, and I had to go to school for a bit. Anyways, it was pretty funny. But the point of it is, I remember, there's the flashback there. Thanks for bearing with me. But I remember is that I would do the quoting and get the work, and I just get the guys to do it, because I like doing the quoting and and the selling and the getting the deals, and I didn't like doing the work so much. And that's and that's why I think interestingly, that's why sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs actually have dyslexia, because people with dyslexia have a huge advantage. They can't do a lot of things, especially on the technical side of business, so they're better at delegating and hiring. Often they'll get kids to help them with their homework in school. Some of them get people to write their tests. That's a whole other thing. Or they'll get their teachers to help them. They'll do the tests verbally. But in business, there are many dyslexic entrepreneurs, because they're very good at delegating, because there's a bunch they can't do. Yet people that are very good at a bunch of things sometimes have a harder time letting go of stuff.
So if we go back to the purpose of entrepreneurship, if we go back to what are entrepreneurs trying to achieve, it makes me think of one word, which is freedom. Like I said, they want to achieve a level of freedom. Now, it could be time freedom or money freedom or personal freedom or something else. But freedom is the thing that I think of when I think about entrepreneurs. And it's ironic when you then think that entrepreneurs get stuck in this situation where they feel trapped, which is the opposite of freedom. Which is really kind of what we're talking about here, which is what to focus on to ensure that you love your work.
Exactly. And there's a path to freedom all the time. But it's like that story of a baby elephant. If you take a baby elephant, this is a bad thing. It's not humane. But the stories they do with a baby elephant is they put a chain around its leg and tie it to a post. So its whole life, it thinks it's attached to the post. I'm told, not from experience, that you can even undo the chain from the post and the elephant still won't leave. And it's so strong, it could rip the post out of the ground. It could rip anything out of the ground. But because from when it was young, it's trained and conditioned. And that's what happens to entrepreneurs sometimes. And I agree, we are driven by freedom, but they get stuck in these things and they forget there's another way. And I've seen it. I had one entrepreneur, awesome guy, built a great business, but he was wanting to sell it. And we got talking about it. Like, why would you want to sell it? He goes, well, he's working too hard, and he hated a bunch of the stuff he was doing. Interestingly, the one thing he hated the most, and I think I mentioned this on another show, was dealing with all the lawsuits he had with employees, from employees that left. It drove him crazy. Well, it turns out he's very aggressive. And when people were getting fired, he was in the room. And because of his aggressive nature, it may have caused the employees to feel a little bit less love and maybe more wanting to fight and sue. So whether or not he truly was creating more lawsuits because of his, very direct, aggressive nature, he also just hated dealing with it.
Yeah.
And so when we talked about it, well, first of all, maybe have someone else do the firing. like an HR consultant that you could use to do that and outsource that, because his internal HR person may not have been as good as that, may or may not. And then two, have this HR consultant who was a very smart HR consultant that I connected him with, deal with all the legal issues. So he's like, I can do that. I'm like, why not? You're the boss. Don't forget you're the boss. And interesting, after that, the number of lawsuits went down because he was no longer in the room and people got let go. And, he was frustrated with them too, right? And so his frustration probably came through. And the lawsuits got cleaned up without his involvement. He would get a 30-second update. His job love went up by probably 20% from that one single decision, but he felt trapped, like he had to do it. He felt he had to deal with his own legal issues. And, I've seen it enough, but you don't have to do anything. And again, he didn't even have the right team, but we got a consultant that he was already doing some stuff with to handle it.
See, there was an actor called Mel Brooks, I think, the actor, producer.
Yes.
And in one of his movies, I've got this line that sticks with me. And he says, it's good to be king. Now, I think he was going into a feast with a whole range of ladies, and there was a whole stuff that was going. But we're breaking up there for the next bit. But it's good to be king, and it's good to be the boss, because you get to create the future. You get to create the job that you want. I studied entrepreneurship in Boston with an executive program with the Entrepreneurs Organization. And I remember there was a guy who came and speak to us there. Now, he was one of the first master franchisors for Kentucky Fried Chicken across, I'm going to say like a dozen or 20 US states. He had the master franchise, and he was like one of the first people to really take it out there. An amazing entrepreneur. And he said, he came out and he said, he must have been 85 or 90 years old. And he said, look, you guys all come in here and you tell me about all your problems, right? All I seem to hear is problems. Well, here's the thought. If you don't have any problems, then you don't have a business. So you give me all your problems. I've got no problem having problems. I'll sort them out. And it was just such old school, simple wisdom. Like, if you don't have any problems, you don't have a business. Like, you're going to have to sort this stuff out. But you can, if you think beyond this week, you can solve these problems. You can get these things out of the way. You can love your work so that you don't have to think of escaping to do something else.
If you set yourself up for success. And that's kind of what we want to dig into, because, to start with, we got in our 5-point list. We like to make a list of our most important points here for you. But number one, is that you gotta love the work, or you're just not going to sustain the energy. You got to find enjoyment in it. And, and for a lot of people, those problems are headaches, or maybe it personally bothers them. But as that entrepreneur shared, that's what the root of business is. At the senior level, you are troubleshooting problems and finding ways to double down on opportunities, a bit of both. By the way, if you're only dealing with problems, there's a different problem you're dealing with in your business, i.e., something is wrong if all you're doing is solving problems. You need to do a lot of that. But you also have to have the opportunities, because a business that only solves problems, usually that doesn't go so well. It starts to, the growth will normally stop or slow down from our experience. So, but first remembering that you should love your job, and it's possible. You just might have to make a whole bunch of changes.
If you're a little bit worn out, you're a little bit tired, you've been working hard, but we like that's normal. Okay. But if you've had a holiday and you love your work, you should be looking forward to going back to work and getting into it. That's the kind of, that's what you should aspire to, getting your role to be in that situation so that you do love it. And rather than thinking, I need to do something different all the time, I need to sell this business, or I need to get out, or I need to, retire, or whatever it is. Like, how can you create a business that you look, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 years into the future. And you think, if I could impact this many people, both employees and customers, and this is the kind of the dent that I'm going to make in the universe, that should give you great excitement. Like that's what
Yes.
we're really trying to do here, is build enduring great businesses.
Yeah, we have another couple episodes ago, we talked about that, about when
Yeah.
entrepreneurs lose their vision. So go back and listen to that one if you've lost your vision. It's 2 episodes back, I think 2 or 3.
It was
But
episode 30.
this is the thank you, episode 30. So, but this is about, tactically how you spend your time, and and the way that I look at it, my belief, and there's a chapter in my book, Your Oxygen Mask First, and it's called Invest in Your Sweet Spots. And the idea of it is to get to the point where 80% of your time you're enjoying what you're doing. And I cannot tell you how many people have come across that they're not at 80 for sure. They're not even, they might not even be at 20.
Yeah.
Right. They're buried in a bunch of stuff they don't enjoy. And of course they hate the business. Of course they want to shut it down, sell it, start something different, because it ain't fun. It's just like having a pair of shoes and there's full of pins and needles and rocks in the bottom. Like it ain't, you're going to want a new pair of shoes, or you're going to want to take the damn things off. And so many times they're so lost, and and we can come in and we can see it because they can't. And I've seen all kinds of situations where people just can't stand it. And there's, lingering problems in the business that kind of weigh them down is part of it. But a lot of it, they just don't get to do the fun stuff anymore. Like, some CEOs love to work on innovation. Some like to sell. Like some, I had one entrepreneur, they were probably doing at that point 500-600 million of revenue and, $50 million of EBITDA. It was a solid business. He'd still be having a big deal he'd be working on all the time. He needed some deal time every week. It fueled him. Plus, he liked to stay in the game so he could set the bar with some of his guys and make sure that, that he could help them to do it. And he was setting a role model of how to do these deals, because he'd often do the biggest, juiciest deals. Yeah. But for him, if he wasn't involved in a deal, he didn't feel his best. Like that was critical for him. But sometimes people get too grown up adult and doing too many of the shoulds, and not enough of the want tos. And that's a design flaw in how they've designed their job or the team around them that's supporting them.
For the average person, if you were looking to sell your business, what does it look like after that? I was talking to a guy maybe a couple of months ago, and he spoke about how they had sold their business and they'd had a year off and they were going stir crazy. And they'd realized what they'd done was they wished that they were back in the business, making it better. So thinking about selling the business to play golf or to retire, if you are so motivated that you've started and grown a business, you've got to be wary that sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side, but it might actually be worse. And what you're really looking for is to build a business that you will truly love and the job that you will truly love.
Yes, that is the idea, is to do that. And sometimes we get lost, and that's the root of it. So let's help people find their way home.
Yeah.
Right. If they are lost, what is the way home from all of this?
So first of all, as we said, you must love the work that you do, or you can't endure. If you don't passionately love your job, the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you've got to accept this fundamental principle that you're not going to be able to stick it out over the long term. And that's the catalyst for change. That's the catalyst to build the work that you'd like. So therefore, is to create a list of the tasks that give you energy and take your energy. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, doing accounts reconciliation, that drains my energy. Like I can think of a lot of things that I'd rather do before that would come before that. So what's the things that give me energy in the role and drain my energy? And then that could be anything. I'm going to come back to what you said before about billionaire habits. Like you can delegate any task at all, because to your book, your oxygen mask first, that particular chapter, we want to try to build a model where you've got 80% of the time doing the things that you love.
Absolutely. And for me, I find that like there's a lot of stuff I hate to, I will deal with a massive conflict, a big problem, an irate customer any time before I'll do administration. Any sort of filling out a form makes me want to poke out my own eyes. Like administration documents, because my brain is not wired for that. And yes, I am capable, but it hurts. It's like I have a thing for numbers. Numbers talk to me. But sitting and analyzing spreadsheets all day long would kill me. Like I would hate it, even though I have a high degree of skill with numbers. My best courses in college were accounting and statistics, to the point where you probably wouldn't even believe my marks I got, Brad. But it was silly. But I could not do that for a job all day. It doesn't give me energy, although numbers would be an asset. So the starting point is just realizing and separating. And it's a good old, almost like a pro and con list. Gives energy, takes energy. Don't judge it. Don't pay too much attention to it. But if you're spending, I don't care how capable you are, how smart you are, if you're spending too much of your time doing stuff that takes energy, it ain't going to work at all. And no matter who you are. And the thing is like, our job description is kind of like, do everything that's needed. But and so we ended up getting pulled into stuff that we shouldn't. There's all kinds of other stuff that we probably should stick away from. So, yeah.
And so then we move on to number 3. So just to recap, you got to love the work or you can't endure it. Then create a list of the tasks that give you energy and take your energy. But then number 3 is identify the environment that you like to work in. So I got a reasonably interesting example. I've got my standard workstation that I do all of my day-to-day work on, preparing for strategic planning workshops and emails and all of that stuff. When it came time to write a book, I found it hard to get into the kind of the alpha state, into the flow state in this environment. So I found, and I work really good with white noise in the background, like a silent environment. Yeah, I find it hard. So I actually found the best writing was in cafes where there was a lot of hustle and bustle, and I could tune out and be kind of completely alone in a really busy, noisy cafe. So I can instantly think of, I was in Auckland, New Zealand, and I did some of the best work there. Or there's cafes around this city, or even in Sydney. I remember I had an extra day and I went and I found some busy areas in Sydney to type. So you've got to find the environment that works for you. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can relate. White noise works for me. It's interesting looking for a new home, and knowing probably the number one thing is natural light and something interesting to look out at. So some sort of a view and natural light, is critical for me. There's times when I can go in a place that's not, but anyway, natural light is everything. Like windows to me make a house. Yeah. And the more windows, the better in a house, as long as it has air conditioning in the summertime. But but naturally, but the other thing is, to me, is airplanes is one of my best environments. Like, people talk about, oh, how did you handle? I mean, obviously I'm not doing it today, but in the past, how do you handle those flights? Because I would go to the Middle East, 4 times a year, India once or twice a year, Australia, or somewhere like that, at least once a year. And then throughout the US constantly. I don't like short airplane rides. Like, 4 or 5 hours is a decent start. I'll take a 10-hour flight any day because I am so damn productive. I actually met a guy who, when he needed to get a lot of work done, he would buy a long return ticket. Now in business class, so it was comfortable, but he would fly to Tokyo or London or Germany or somewhere and back so he could have power time to get his work done. So everybody is different.
I'm just shocked at that. I believe you. Don't get me wrong, but that's remarkable.
Well, because it's a different environment. Some people do well in a park, right? Some
Yeah.
people do well in a crowded space. Some people do well in a private office. Everyone thrives in different environments. So that's the physical environment. But then there's also other types of environments. Like some people thrive in an environment of a deadline and high pressure.
Mm.
Some people don't thrive in high pressure. Some people thrive in an environment where they're working on 2 or 3 things at once. Some people thrive on only one thing at a time, right? So there's all kinds of different things that really create environments where people, some people thrive working on a team, some people thrive individually. Like, again, everything is different. I know for me, collaborative under pressure is a great environment. I love that. And airplanes and airports,
Mm.
which I'm missing out on these days. Interestingly, I've got my AirPods here, but I also know if I am sitting by myself and doing stuff, I'll listen to focused music. Apple's got a focused music. There's other apps that have specific focused music, and it's a little step beyond white noise. It also makes it easier for my thinking and creative time,
Yeah.
which is different than normal working time.
Yeah.
So that getting clear, and if you're not sure, look at history. When did you do? Because sometimes say, well, what do you like? Well, I don't know what I like. But you can look at what you don't like. Sometimes that helps, but also go back into history and find when you did your best work, when you felt the best and were most productive. What was that environment? And it can give you some clues, but the environment has a huge impact on it. Remember, I mentioned I won that scholarship in college. One of the biggest reasons I won is I did so well is because I was a part of study groups. I am horrific at studying on my own, like not good, because I just won't do it. But I was in a study group and we were brainstorming and teaching, and the study group was actually the catalyst for my success. I was interested in the topics which help. Collaborative. So study groups I thrive in. Group projects I thrive in.
Yeah.
Collaboration like you and I. But I will guarantee you for almost, like, I was not a great student before I went there in high school. I was a mediocre student. So I guarantee you that if it wasn't a study group kind of environment, you could probably shave 25% off my grades. And that's not false humility. I think it made it. It would have made a massive difference.
Yeah.
Because of the environment.
So you've got to have the environment right. You got to know what gives you energy and drains your energy, and you got to understand that you must love the work or you can't endure. So then what happens next? So you know the environment, you know what's giving you energy. What do we do next? Number 4 is build a path to have your work time be 80% of the things that give you energy. So this is from your book, Your Oxygen Mask First. Tell us about this, Kevin.
Yeah, well, you just got to decide that you're going to love your job, period. There's periods of hard stuff and there's parts of it that will be hard. That's life. But you got to find a way, whether it's the type of work that you do and what you don't, and the environments that you set up, that you'll love it. So for example, if you don't love conflict, how can you create an environment that the conflict will be easier? Why do so many CEOs have people like us run their quarterly strategic planning meetings? Right? Why do we have some CEOs that help us to facilitate really important 360 feedback meetings, right? You can have someone co-pilot with you on the most high conflict environments. Those are predictable, not your everyday job, but a lot of the high conflict environments, you can have somebody else work with you on it, right? You can delegate that. That's why people are relieved to have someone else run their strategic planning sessions, because it's damn hard. And if they're done right, there's a lot of debate and conflict too. So you just got to make the decision that you're going to love it and have faith that you'll be able to find a way to make it happen. That's all it is. Just decide, and knowing that it's possible and deciding that you're going to, then you got to, make some tough calls, but that's, not always tough calls. Sometimes it has a lot to do with your team. Sometimes you're not delegating enough to your team. Sometimes your team isn't good enough for you to delegate to. It could be either.
And so build a path was the first part of that. So build path, build a plan. How are you going to get to the situation where you love 80% of the work that you do and it gives you energy? Well, what's the time frame on that? So if you were to give up, for want of a better term, and sell, you know, it might take you 3 to 5 years of profit that you're effectively collecting at once. So then you can think about the longer term perhaps and say, well, what am I going to do then? A, but then B, it can begin to set a time frame. So rather than saying,
and by the way, in that 3 to 5 years, you're still there. They're almost always going to contract you to stay for at least 2.
Yeah.
So you're there for 2 years of that profit payback. So then you've got between 1 and 3 years truly of extra cash you get beyond the time you're staying no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So really it's like 1 to 3 years of your profit. And in that time frame, sorry, I don't want to count that out. There's a contractor, you have to stay anyways.
Yeah.
If it's a notable transaction. Sorry, back to your point, Brad.
And you don't have freedom. That's the whole point of it.
You actually have less freedom because now you're their employee.
Yeah. And so this, I want to call out idolatry, it's called, right, which is worshiping false gods. So just know that if you do the hard work, it is possible to build the type of job that you will get great energy from. But you got to know that could take 3 years or 5 years to have this kind of level. Maybe you'll do it in a year and it'll be great, but just don't expect everything to happen all at once. It may take a while. Then number 5, understand the concept of billionaire habits and begin delegating to get you to 80%. So you mentioned that before, the billionaire habits, which is really, you can delegate anything that you want. You can delegate accounts receivable. You can automate that now.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I'll tell you that. You can automate things. And you can even have robots do some of this stuff. So understanding that it is not impossible. You've just got to work and grind through it.
So it's, if you hate dealing with your bank, you can get an awesome CFO that does all of the stuff with the bank, and you have to show up for a little relationship chat once in a while. So you don't have to deal with banks. You don't have to deal with lawyers. You don't have to deal with almost everything. Heck, if you really hate the running of the operational business, you can get a president in place who will run and deal with everyone, and you could be strategic and just work with your president, right? Or you can get a president to fully run the company and you can do other things. So you can get people to do almost every single thing. You can get people to do every single thing you do today. And there's the old cliche, we're all replaceable. But we are. We are all very, very replaceable. But when you're stuck in the middle of it, you don't see it. And, I've had the great fortune, there's one business I work with, a local business I know I do some work with. And I know another company similar that I've worked with that is 20 times the size, same industry. And I could see what the owner and CEO of that business is doing. And I see that you can hire people to do that job and 5 times the size of that job. So everything can be, but again, that's hard to believe. I just had another entrepreneur ask me of a small going to medium-sized business about sharing his financials transparently with his team, right? That's kind of a growth phase that people go through, starting to share the financials.
Yeah.
I know I've been through that lots of times with people, but there's these just different phases of growth that you go through, of learning how to have people more involved in things and having more ownership. So I think the root of the billionaire habits, if you were a business with $1 billion of turnover, what would that look like? Who would you hire? How would you delegate? And you would find your way through everything.
Yeah. You would have those issues. Now, people might be looking at what we're listening to what we're saying here and saying, Yeah, but that's all right if you've got $1 billion. But you know what? Like I got a 10 or $15 million business or a 5 million or whatever. I've got a smaller business. Like we don't have the resources to throw at this. So,
BS.
so how do we respond to that? Because people would be
So,
thinking that.
right. So you start off with deciding what you want it to look like and suspending belief or holding belief and having faith. There is a way.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's what you want and then suspend belief and believe in it. That's number one. That's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Like that's all it is. It's a mind game. That's all it is. So know what you want, believe it's possible.
Because
Right?
you and
And
I are
then,
speaking from, just to draw on that point, you and I are speaking from a mindset of abundance. Like we've seen it. We've
yes,
seen that you can do this. Continue, please.
yes, I've seen people hand off businesses. I had one guy handed off a business and had somebody else ran it, and it made roughly $100 million of profit a year. There is a reasonable chance the guy running it may have done a better job than the owner of running it.
Yeah.
It's so if you're going to hand off and that's a very complex competitive business, and the guy was an outstanding CEO, so of course it would work. So yes, we come from abundance, and also we've seen it and we know it. And hey, it's way easier from the outside, anyways, right? You don't have the emotional things. So I had a really good point there, Brad. There was something that you were saying. I was going to share this like brilliant thought.
And we're all waiting,
not
waiting
brilliant,
desperately
but
to hear what that
share a
is.
very good thought, and it just disappeared. Billionaire Habits, seeing it. I don't know. It'll come back, but it was related to exactly what we're talking about.
Our audience of 3, your mother and my mother, and
Yeah,
my stepmother, we're all sitting with bated breath.
I know. It will come back. The main thing is to have, yeah. Oh, I know. And then the next thing is then believe for whatever it is you are going to delegate that the right person exists. So one of my favorite stratagems is a little slice of a brilliant mind. Little slice of a brilliant mind. And another company working with in Canada, the CEO, she was brilliant in the early days. She's the one that taught me this stratagem. She was about 30 million in revenue, and she had an HR person and a head of sales and head of HR who were from 100 to 150 million dollar companies, and she's only at 30. But how would you say a person, ask me, Brad, how does a person who's only doing $30 million have such senior people on their team?
How? I don't know. That's very interesting.
It's called 2 days a week.
Fractional. Yeah.
You can take a $150,000 person and hire them for 50 grand a year or 60 grand a year or 65 grand a year. So she had the best badass, and this guy's name, I'm going to say his name. His name is Don Daintree. He was head of sales. I love Don. He is an amazing man, an amazing salesperson. He single-handedly helped to build this company when it was at a lower level. And a shout out to Don if he's listening. He's awesome. We joke around lots. We have a lot of fun. He's still with the company kind of now as a consultant. He ended up becoming full-time, but he took on the company a couple days a week. And he was, I don't know what I'm not going to talk about pay, but it was a fraction of what he would normally get paid, but it was only a fraction of his time.
Yeah.
And eventually, as the company grew and he fell in love with the company, he gradually dropped the other work because he was like a freelance consultant, dropped his other client work, and then ended up joining the company full time. And, took the company probably to, from 30 to, well over 150, almost 200 million in sales. Awesome. By him driving sales. And he built a great team. He was an awesome guy. But because they hired such a senior, capable, fully experienced, had all the relationships, knew the industry, it was brilliant. And they did the same with their HR person. They did the same with their marketing strategy person. They all ended up becoming full-time, but they hired a tiny slice of them to start with.
That's a good strategy. I like that. That's really
brilliant. It's one of my favorites. It's interesting. That's why we've got one of our new team members is, a head of HR from a notable Canadian company. And he'll end up doing a bunch of that for companies too. Just a little slice of the been there, done that brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's experience, right? And so how do you do this? You get amazing people, and you don't need to hire them full time, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing is there's consultants, and then there's amazing people you can hire on a consulting contract.
Yes.
Very different thing. There's consultants who will do research and figure things out. We're talking badass executives who, the company they're at sold or something else, who are available for a little slice of their time.
Mm.
So it's A+ players that you can buy a little piece of.
Yeah, where for them, what's happened, they've seen it all before. They know the game. They're looking 7 chess moves ahead, whereas you might only be able to look 1 or 2.
And you don't even know about the other ones. Like
Yeah.
You got it. It's
Yeah.
outstanding.
That's awesome. So I guess overall, what we're saying is that in order to build an enduring, great business, like you can't you can't give up. Like, it takes time, and you've got to stick with it. And in order
You got to
to
remember you're the boss. Stick
Yeah.
with remembering you're the darn boss. And you can do it if you're the entrepreneur. Even if you're an executive, you have lots of flexibility.
Yeah.
But it's remembering you can tailor it the way that you want it. And it's almost like buying clothes. Some people buy clothes, and if it doesn't fit right, they tolerate it. Some people use a tailor. So it's like you can always tailor things to suit you. We just forget.
And the reason that people become entrepreneurs is freedom. Like that, you shouldn't lose sight of that. You shouldn't come away from that overarching principle. Now, that doesn't mean freedom doesn't mean retirement. Freedom means freedom in whatever capacity it means to you, and that means having happiness, having, loving the work that you do, feeling a great sense of pride and reward from that work. So let's maybe review the items that we've got here, if we can.
So the first is you got to love the work, or you can't endure. You're going to run out of juice. So you've got to find a way to love it. And the intent is to ideally, in the direction of 80% of the time, you're enjoying what you're doing. And to get there, you kind of first start by making a list of the stuff that gives you energy, i.e. you enjoy it, and takes energy or drains you. And that's your starting point to understand it. And then the next angle is to look at the environments that you thrive in. Again, individual versus team, competitive versus not, collaborative, which is a version of teamwork, versus not, high pressure versus low pressure, working remotely versus in a room with others, working on an airplane, working with background noise, or who knows, or sitting in nature humming, I don't know. And then with that, have the belief that you can get it to 80% and start to build your path. Just figuring out one thing at a time that you'd love to get someone else to do, and figuring out who, and making sure that you hand it off to someone who is incredibly capable. Don't delegate the stuff to your weak people on your team, because you'll end up retreating. Sometimes, interestingly, the easiest thing to delegate for some is something that you're really good at, because then you know what to watch out for, and it's easier to manage. The other times you can delegate stuff that you're horrible at, because then you can rely on an expert. Again, it depends on what works for you. And then going back to, if in doubt, look at the concept of billionaire habits. If you had built a business that was worth $1 billion or doing $1 billion of revenue, how would you think about it then from, that client, thinking up at that point, and then zooming back to today with a very different perspective. And I think that's what the root of this is all about, Brad. It's about perspective. It's remembering it's possible to have that freedom, and then making some choices to move you in that direction.
Yeah, it's possible. You've just got to get your head out of the situation to think, what is it? Going back to the words of Mel Brooks as we begin to close, it's good to be king. You get to build the job that you want. Never, ever, ever lose sight of that, and keep pushing. Well, that was a good chat. That was,
Yeah.
that was good. Got into some interesting stuff there. So thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about is building enduring great businesses. I'm Brad Giles, and of course, always I'm joined by Kevin Lawrence, my co-host. You can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au, and you can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.
Have a great week.